we have a pretty good panel here. Just to introduce them before we start, Marianne Offalter runs the Digital Maker Services team at NGA, accountable for building and running a lot of the tools that we'll talk about today. Andy Curtis is the technical lead for that team and those tools. And then Maggie Balone asked me to introduce her as Baloney. We're here to have some jokes, guys. Fun is authorized, so you can laugh. It's good. Maggie is in our integrated program office for Foundation, and so her team is using a lot of the enterprise tools that we'll talk about. So excited to have me talk about a little motherhood and apple pie on the strategic side, but then Marianne and Andy, the team that build the tools, and then some from the user side as well. So I'll kick it off a bit. We published NGA's first ever technology strategy last year, and we published it just in time for the GEOINT that didn't happen, but it was very helpful to get through the public release process. And I hope folks read it. Please Google it now or later. We worked really hard to make it public and to be able to share it. And it starts with a premise, and that premise is that NGA is a software and a data enterprise. And that premise is provocative to some folks, but I think it's important to frame how we think about what we do. And a gross oversimplification, right? A lot of what we do is either bring in or create data, make sense of it in some way, manage it in some way like you just heard about, and share it out, right? And so software is core to doing that well, which means software is core to our mission, right? And I think that mission point is really important to bring up at every one of these panels, right? We are not implementing DevSecOps because it's fun, although sometimes we can have fun with it. We're doing it to do our mission better, right? And that, I worry, sometimes gets lost in these technical conversations, and so really wanted to start with that. Okay, so that's the premise of the tech strategy. NGA is a software and a data enterprise. From that premise, we get to the theme of the tech strategy, which is around empowering our builders and makers. I've been at NGA about 2 years, and I saw very, very quickly that we have a technical and a talented workforce, and that's both the government and the contractor side, right, as one team. And not every agency, not every organization in government has that, and that is a really important thing, but we often don't give our people, our talented workforce on the government and contractor side, the tools they need to deliver software, especially, and iterate on it at the speed that mission demands, right? And so we start with this theme that the best and most important thing we can do is enable the builders and makers of geospatial technology. So that's kind of some of the high level, that's the theme we start with, and then I'll give like 2 more minutes and then we'll get into the panel. From that theme, we have 5 initiatives, right? And the first initiative is almost the same wording. The first initiative is called Enabling the Builders and Makers, right? We are not broken records. We will be consistent in our messaging. I think that's really important, right? So our first initiative is around enabling builders and makers, and DevSecOps is a really important part of that, and so that's what we'll talk about here today. But if I were to summarize it in a couple of sentences, it would be around how if we really believe that software is core to our mission, then delivering software in a modern way is something that we have to do. And if we want to deliver software in a modern way, we have to have the right environment. And so that environment, creating that environment, it's not just the tools and the technologies, it's the people and the culture, which are often the hardest part. But creating that environment is really what this initiative is all about and what we'll talk about today. It is worth saying, though, I recognize a lot of what I just said isn't new. It's probably been said at every GEOINT for the past couple of decades. The 2019 Defense Innovation Board did an amazing study that talked all about it. This morning, I was talking to Andy, I was reading the 1987 Defense Science Board study on military software that said a lot of the exact same things, right? The hard parts of this have been known for a long time, but we haven't always implemented them as well as we can and we should. So with that, I'll stop talking from the strategic level and we'll let the folks doing the actual implementing talk a little bit more about what they're building, and then we'll take a bunch of questions. So Marianne, do you want to talk about the work your team is doing, the different product lines that you all run?
Yeah. Wow, that was loud. So I'm Marianne Offalter. I'm running the team that's executing the DevSecOps and the platform for NGA. We actually broke that down into 7 product lines. We have the DevSecOps, which is providing all of the tools and capabilities within the pipeline. We have the PaaS, which is the platform. We're looking to use Kubernetes as the basis for that. Then I have API management. We are getting that out, hopefully. And then I have Kanban, which is like a continuous monitoring operations. So we're actually doing real-time monitoring of the capabilities, which has been really great. And then DevX, which is we call developer experience, and that's actually something that's been newer for this. And it actually is providing hands-on labs, dev sessions, we call them, where we actually talk about what the developers need to know, different topics. They created the developer portal where they can go and they can find all the information they need. So that developer experience has really been the big thing that's happened over the last year to help push the DevSecOps and the platform within our environment. Which one am I forgetting? Yeah, I don't either. So really, our main mission is to accelerate development at NGA to get those mission capabilities out faster. So that's our main mission, that's what we're trying to do, and that's what we want to accomplish. Andy.
That's perfect. I'll double down on the DevX piece. I think a thing that Marianne's team has done really well is it's not just about delivering tools, it's not just about delivering a version control system for people to use on every domain, but you actually have to help people use them, and you have to get them the documentation and help them onboard. And that DevX team has done a really amazing job, both creating the right documentation, but also working with people one-on-one. And that's something that they stood up a whole team around because we recognize the importance of that. So I'll double down on that. And then, Andy, do you want to talk a little bit more of the developer perspective, as well as a little more on workflow orchestration and messaging, the other two product lines?
Oh. Yeah, those were the two. Thank you.
Yeah, he's got them.
Thanks, Alex. No, the messaging and workflow is a little bit some of our newer product lines, and these really came out of a genesis of looking across NGA at several of our programs who have gone and implemented these a countless number of times, and saying that we really need to step back and can we provide these as part of the developer tooling that they can just come and use. Messaging is really an extension of our API platform, focusing more on the asynchronous calls, asynchronous type of messaging, especially useful for data analytics, analytic processing that may take some period of time, or data transfers, or working with some of the more remote sites that have a little bit slower comms. Workflow is an interesting challenge of how can we provide tooling for developers to build analytic processing, or really any type of processing, step-based or DAG, directed acyclic graph-based type of workflows, with two goals. One is to provide a common platform to do that. The other is to be able to provide reusable tools that can be used within those data pipelines that Deepak was talking about earlier. We have a few examples of that. One of the easy ones is we don't need everybody to figure out how to read data from our S3 data stores. So can we build that once and let every analytic process use that? And I think hitting on some of the deeper questions about why NGA started this process and where we were headed, and I think really getting into the sec portion of DevSecOps. And it's in the middle for a reason, and that's because it really spans the entire process. We want to provide a consistent set of tools to our developers as early in the process that we can. We've all probably been there. We've been developing software, we get to delivery, and we have to run a specific security tooling on it, and we find out we have 1,500 security findings we have to go solve. Traditionally, those tools have been expensive and hard for our developers to use or get their hands on even. So providing them as part of our CI/CD pipelines is really one of the primary pieces to provide that consistent accessibility to those tools as early as possible, and really provide that observability all the way through the stack, all the way to delivery, to where we can observe that software running on our platforms and monitor it there. So.
Awesome. A way I think of what Andy was just talking through a little bit is probably 5 years ago at NGA, if you wanted to build and host and run a simple web application, there wasn't really a way to do that. And then their team built the platform as a service to enable that and really to make it much easier to build relatively simple applications. What they learned from that, though, is that wasn't the answer for everything, right? And so now learning from how people either wanted to use that and weren't able to, or just what the mission demands moving forward. They're building things out like workflow orchestration to answer those next common things. Whereas 5 years ago it was a simple web application. Now it's much more around data pipelines and people building algorithms and tying them together. And so I think the way we're pushing in that direction is an awesome evolution and really important for how we are becoming much more data centric, as you heard in the last panel. So that's from the team building the tools. Maggie, do you want to talk a little bit from a team working to use them?
Sure. So in our particular organization, we had a ton of vendors that we were working with and kind of finding that they were all kind of doing things in a little bit of a different fashion. So we ended up writing a particular document, and this document included everything basically in the kitchen sink, everything from planning to development to security to monitoring, going into operations, and it kind of lays out that entire process. It's a one-stop shop for everything for our vendors, so they know exactly where to go. And a lot of our folks, like we work a lot with Mary Ann's group on particular challenges maybe we have in bringing things over into the particular environment to leverage. Andy's helped us out quite a bit too when we reach certain issues with code coverage or other different types of things that come into play. So, and then we also have worked in this particular document too. We've laid out 3 different types of colored boxes inside of there. One is color is laid out to what, in my particular organization, what we consider is important and kind of the direction that we want to head. And then we also kind of laid out another box that kind of helps us drive what we're trying to say by following the NGA text strategy in that same particular way. And then we have the ways that, is a nice to have, but it may not be what we really need, So we work with our vendors on those particular items as well. And then also we have worked with our chief software engineer. He actually just developed a documentation as well for the developer side of the house. And in there he kind of talks about branching and those different types of versions of software that we want to use in their development process at the same time.
Awesome. I think a takeaway I have, hope people don't mind me summarizing some of it, but I think the pieces of the documentation parts, but also people helping people, right? And Maggie talking about reaching out to Andy and Mary Ann's team. I think there's a lot that we can improve just on the process side, but on the culture where we are willing and able to talk to each other, I think is not something that every government agency has always had, and something that I can sincerely appreciate out of Mary Ann and Andy's team and how they run those tools. All right, so that was the intro. Now we're going to get into a few questions. The first ones I got, I'll summarize a bit, and they're in the security theme, which, as Andy said, is in the middle, so it's a good place to be. So there's one on process. So I'll just tee you up each so you know what's coming, so that you have a second to think. Oh, Mary Ann, you're going to be first. There's one on process improvements, kind of around the ATO process, introducing delays, and what you're thinking on accreditation, continuous ATO on that front. Maggie, you've done a lot on the swap side, so you want to talk through maybe some of what you've done there. And Andy, we didn't get this one yet, but I've been wanting to ask this one around moving code low to high and some of the work we're doing there. So let's start, just to tee you all up, know what's coming, but let's start with Mary Ann.
Always first. So one of the biggest challenges we've had is we can put all the right tools in place, we can put all the right things in place, but without changing the processes, the security, how we do things, it doesn't matter. It's not going to change how quickly we can get code out there. So one of the big things we're trying to do is make it to where, especially like on the platform, you don't have to do the full accreditation. Now you inherit a majority of those controls, and now you only have a very small section of controls that you need to meet in order to get that capability out. We've had people get accreditation as fast as a week. I know they call it ATO in a day, but we're saying ATO in a week. So it really, based on what you're deploying and how you're deploying it, our goal is to reduce that number of controls that you need to accomplish in order to get that first ATO. And then to add on to that, because you use the DevSecOps tooling and because your code is going through that process, we're trying to get security to kind of jump in, not at the end, but towards the beginning, and actually watching how you're getting that software through so that they're not having to sit there and analyze it at the end every single time. You can continually see updates that are going through and what's happening as we go. I think also with the Kubernetes, we're hoping that we can also do some monitoring there and see changes as they come across. So really the goal is trying to improve those security processes so that we don't have to wait a year to get ATO.
Now you're Andy. Pick your choice.
All right. Okay, I'll go. So we all know what SWAP is, right? Submit, wait, and pray that it makes its way through. I'm joking. Software whitelist, yeah, assurance process. So one of our particular challenges in working with one of our largest vendors is just deploying a particular hotfix, right, to get that product out to our end users. And it was taking us an average of 10 days in order to get that approval to go through. So what we did is we worked with the SWAP team, we worked with our vendors, we came up with agreement with a branching strategy, how we would do our version control in our particular software, and then we were able to come to an agreement, and we've now gone from a hotfix taking 10 days to 1 day to going through that approval process. So that was huge for us.
Is that reusable by others, do you think?
Sure, I'm sure we could come to some sort of agreement because the SWAP team is awesome.
Yeah, I think we actually have used it on ours. Our biggest problem with SWAP was by the time we submitted the code and it got approved, the next version was out, and we literally weren't being able to keep up with version updates. So the accelerated SWAP process has definitely been helpful in those areas.
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, so I guess back to Alex's original question to me about the moving things cross-domain, because this is something that's probably near and dear across the entire IC. When most of the tools that Marianne is working on employing are commercial tools we buy and license, or some open source tools, there are a couple of pieces that we develop ourselves. One of those is a project we affectionately call Wormhole. It's magic. You put things in on one side of the domain and they come out on the other domain. And this is really focused on specifically on software. The big things we started with GitLab. We started with our source code. The developer can commit source code to specific branches. Those branches get replicated within minutes, magic. We've moved on to doing software artifacts as well, specifically libraries, things like Node or Java, Maven, Central, those types of things, moving those up automatically. And we're just getting to the point where we're working on moving containers automatically, which is probably the #1 feature request we've had since we announced this effort a year ago.
Awesome. I've just figured out this amazing thing I can do, which is outsource even the reading of the questions to the panelists. So Marianne's coming up next.
Yep, so this question is, how is the DevSecOps process at NGA affected by differences across networks, i.e. different libraries, support for JWix and Zipper? Back to Wormhole, that's exactly why we've tried to replicate not just the software, but the libraries across domain. We have installed a repo, and basically, basically we want to make sure that, our whole goal is that whatever you develop on low, you can use that same code all the way up. So that means we need to get the libraries up, we need to make sure all of the same tools are up, they're on the same version. So a lot of that has been, part of our main focus this last year is trying to make sure that we have the exact same environment on all 3 domains so that we can get that code processed quickly and not have to change every single time we go to a different domain. That not only helps the mission capabilities, it helps me as well, because my team can also deploy quickly and get something out in 10 minutes instead of taking weeks because they're going between different domains.
And I think the thing that's been really important for us is as we've been hiring software developers and people with software expertise on the government side, they feel the exact pain that contractors have been feeling for a long time, but it's sometimes easier to push things when you're on the government side, right? And so having technical folks in the government side able to feel this pain as well, I think will help all of the contractor teams that are also building software for us and where most of our development happens. And so I think having the expertise in the government side has really helped us see the pain and feel the pain across so many of our teams, so that we can build out these tools that Marianne and Andy's team have been able to build out.
I had one thing to add on that. I think it's really important as well to mention here that this isn't just something for NGA to doing, but this is something we've been working with some of the IC partners, because this is a common problem everybody in the IC and DoD faces, is how you move these things to some of our disconnected networks.
Awesome. I have one more here for Marianne and Andy, and then Maggie will go to you after that. This one's around, someone seems excited about the efficiencies we've gotten, but they're curious how we're working with other government agencies. You know, we're not the only agency in government building software. I think there's some really important partnerships for us. My instinct goes to how we've worked with Platform One a little bit, but any thoughts around either how people at other government agencies can or are using what we have, as well as how we're partnering with other awesome folks in government who are who care about the same problem space.
So Platform One is an interesting one because we've had a lot of talks with the Platform One's folks. And we have a lot of shared interest, and I'll say we've had some great progress with them, and they've done huge amounts of work for us, and we're not afraid to copy their work. One of those is Iron Bank and their secured container repository. We love it. We actually have worked on an expedited security process to be able to pull containers from Iron Bank and make use of them without having to redo the hardening or scanning that would typically be required. So there's also other agencies in the Intel community that are providing some DevSecOps tools to the community, some to their internal space. I think one of the interesting things that I know we like to point out as NGA is a lot of people are familiar with the Air Force's Kessel Run group. They actually started using NGA tools before they were able to deploy their own. That was 5+ years ago now. So it's always been it's a small community in some ways, so we always like to build and copy what we can from the other groups.
And I'll reiterate what you heard there. Our security folks have said what the Air Force has done to accredit the containers in Iron Bank is able to not have to be redone at NGA and used, right? That sounds very simple and does not happen very often in government, and we need much more of that, right? But that's not a concept, that is a real thing that we are able to use those containers today, and I think that's incredibly important for us. Okay, now a little less on the tools side, and we have a question on culture that I thought was a good one, and I was going to hand to Maggie.
So I have, what has been the biggest challenge from a cultural perspective? So I look at DevSecOps as not just being the tool chain, but also the people and the processes, right? We talked about processes. So it's people, it's changing those mindsets, right? We're going to change how we do business. We've been doing this business for 10 years now. Let's see how we can improve that, and developing those trust, not only between our vendors and ourselves. So I try to remove those roadblocks, right? So everybody always thinks, oh, great, it's a government tool chain. I'm going to get stuck dead in the water and I can't move forward. Who do I contact? So in our particular organization, I've become that belly button, right? As soon as I get somebody say, I have a problem, great. Hey, Marianne or Andy, I need help. And almost immediately I get a response back, and there's a meeting set up to see how we can remove that particular roadblock. Woo. But to me, it's the people, right? Having that important relationship with them, building that trust so that we can move forward to build better software for tomorrow.
Awesome. You guys both good on that question?
Yeah, I was going to echo Maggie's on the trust aspect. One of the challenges, I think, cultural-wise, is the major programs are used to doing this all themselves. And the shift from owning their entire destiny to having to trust another part of the organization to provide some of their base capabilities or base tooling is a huge cultural shift. So working on building that trust relationship and proving that we can do this and deliver the capabilities we've said we are.
Yeah, and Alex just showed me a question exactly to that point. The fact that right now, all the different contractors all have their own DevSecOps environment, they all have their own tools, and what we're really pushing for at NGA is everyone to use the government-provided tools and capabilities. we want to standardize. We want to make sure that the code is in the government repository, not in their repository. We're also trying to get them to test where they operate. A lot of times you will go out and build your own network and your own stuff, and you're going to simulate all of the things that we have at NGA. And we're saying you don't have to simulate. Just come test in the environment. It's here. It's available. You can just do it. You don't have to go set up your own network. You don't have to go set up your own tools. You don't have to go accredit these things. They're already accredited. They're there. And you can start coding day one. You don't have to wait 6 months, plan it out, get your own DevSecOps tools, test them out. You literally, day one, go in, start coding. That's our goal.
I think Mary Ann hit on something there that I'd like to expand on, and that's, we've heard today multiple times, we heard from that we want to manage our data, NGA's data, as a strategic asset. And I'll go a step further and say we want to manage NGA's source code as a strategic asset. That if we don't have access to the source code and the ability to build that source code, we could be in trouble down the road. I'll steal one of or line from somebody else, that software ages like milk, not wine, that life has changed in the software development world. Software requires constant maintenance, and we need the ability to do that regardless of the contract changes, government, contractor, wherever the software came from. If it's something we have to build and run ourselves, we should have that ability.
And I just want to expand upon that from the development side of the house, leveraging the government-provided tools. As we move across these different domains, there's that consistency between each of those different environments, right? Not from somewhere developing offsite, and then we bring it on-site, and then, oh man, this isn't working now, or what happened here? That kind of eliminates some of those challenges at the same time, and not having to do the accreditation process for some of these pieces of the tools too, which saves us a lot of time and money.
So Marianne, this can be to any of you, but Marianne touched on the testing piece, which isn't in DevSecOps, but is incredibly important for getting software to operations and making sure that things are working. Can we talk about, I guess the buzz phrase would be moving testing left, but how we are thinking about automating more of the testing and how we are not thinking of that as something that happens at the end?
Okay. So we're working with actually the testing group within NGA, and they've actually put out a strategy where they talk about unit testing, they talk about integration testing, like they have different levels of testing, and we're actually updating our temp to include the DevSecOps process in that testing capability. So really we're trying to get it to where the developer does his initial automated testing early, quickly, finds those bugs. Then we go to the next level of testing where maybe our test group gets involved, and then we go to maybe integration testing where they actually test against other endpoints.
Yeah, this is an area near and dear to my heart because we've been fighting this on a few programs of, traditionally we had a very formal testing process like pretty much everybody in the DoD goes through, and that involved a large amount of manual labor. One of the areas we're really focusing on now is how can we automate this? How can we automate the functional testing all the way through from unit testing we know how to automate, integration testing maybe, functional testing largely is done by hand in most programs today. So how do we automate that? And one of my leaders has always challenged me is, what do we need to do to deliver software every day? This is not in the traditional, and I'll out myself here, 25 years ago or so, I worked on a program where we delivered software usually twice a year to the government. And now we want to be able to deliver the software ideally multiple times a day. We go talk to industry and we talk to Netflix, and like they can push their software, hundreds of times a day. And how do we get there with the testing environments we have today, and how do we need to transform testing? And that's largely an unsolved problem for us. So.
You good? Anything?
Well, I can just say we worked with our testing organization within inside of the agency to develop a process that's a kind of a self-service type of place. So we go for like our IV&V, so there's not something held up. And we've actually worked with that particular organization to help streamline that part of our process too. So always room for improvement.
Awesome. All right, you all have been doing most of the talking, so I'll give you a few minutes break. I'm going to talk about something called the NGA Software Way, and then we'll get back to the questions. But I did want to talk about this because I think it's an important topic. We published this as a draft. It's not final yet, but we put it out as an RFI this summer. And you can think of the NGA Software Way as the implementation guide to go along with our tech strategy, right? If what we've been hearing from the Defense Science Board since 1987 is the problem isn't the strategy, it's the implementation. I think we needed to write a document of what implementation looked like. We didn't come up with this concept, right? This is not some brand new idea. OMB puts out the Digital Service Playbook. The UK government has a really awesome digital service or digital standard. Definitely worth reading out of GDS in the UK. But all of those are about more publishing in the open, and they don't necessarily fit exactly what we do as a combat support agency and as an intelligence agency. And so we wrote the NGA Software Way, learning from those, but more specific around what we need at NGA to deliver useful software faster. And a lot of what we've been hearing today is around the speed side, and that's, I think, a lot of the enabling builders and makers and the DevSecOps side. But the speed doesn't help you if you're not delivering software that is actually usable and that people actually use, right? The concept of usability is good, and the actual usage is necessary for something to actually be valuable to the mission, where I started, that is the whole point of all of this, right? And so the NGA Software Way starts with 3 metrics that we're looking to track across our programs. Once again, hopefully you see the theme. We didn't come up with these, right? These are 3 of the DORA metrics that are well studied around teams that deliver good software do these metrics well, and the availability, lead time, and deployment frequency. And so having certain metrics that we track, those 3 metrics across all our teams, and it has 13 elements of how we are looking to build both the tools we use, and that gets to the question on the common tooling, as well as some of the practices, and it talks a lot about product management and human-centered design. So we put that out this summer. We got dozens of responses, over 300 pages of responses that I am going through. It was really awesome to hear so much feedback from industry. We genuinely appreciate it. I am reading every single page on paternity leave during nap time. It's going pretty well. We're making progress. We don't have a published document yet, but I think it's really important that we get from the strategy to the implementation piece, and so really wanted to put that out and work with NGA to put that out as kind of where we are heading, and it's been incredible to get the feedback we have from industry. So if people haven't seen that, you can go to sam.gov and in the search bar type NGA Software Way, read it. The formal time to respond is closed, but my inbox is open still, and definitely still wanting to learn more and more from industry as we get that to a final document, as we implement it across NGA. Okay. Can you speak more into the mic? The sound's not carrying. Oh, man. Hopefully people heard most of that spiel at least. I got that at the end. Apologies. Okay. Anything on the software way anyone wanted to say? Or I'm happy to move from it. Oh, you all raised your mics. This is good. Keep going.
No, I was actually, it was funny because when Andy was talking about testing and making sure the software is put out more often, we are starting to track metrics on how many commits are happening. Like, we're starting to watch actually what's happening within the tools so that we can start reporting that out to the management. So that's one of the things that I thought that I got out of that.
Well, I was going to say, in our chief software engineer, I know when he was writing his document within our organization, he was using the software way as his guide as to what he was kind of putting out to make sure that we're kind of adhering to that. And I know we've worked with Alex's group and his support in trying to integrate our customers earlier in the process at the same time, so we're developing with them and not just making assumptions on what we think that they need at the end of the day.
Awesome. Fully into the mic now. Okay, 2 things. We've touched on one, but I want to dig deeper on both. DevX and the dev sessions they run, I think, are really important, and I'd love someone to give some context on. And then having this tooling is great and isn't very helpful unless you have actual desktops that you can use to develop software and you have an environment to deploy it in. And so we have built that out as Blue Factory, and so I'd love to hear a little bit about that as well. So anyone could take the bait on DevX, DevSesh, Blue Factory, and any more context we can provide for the audience.
So do you just want to talk about DevSesh?
Yeah, I think the way that we are sharing kind of a lot of the work your team's doing openly and every single week, I think is awesome. And a lot of people probably don't have context on what DevSesh is and how it's grown.
Yeah. So DevSesh started as developer sessions, is kind of, we just shortened it and call it DevSesh. Basically, we pick a topic every week, and we have different developers around the agency come and talk to those topics. We've had Iron Bank, we've had some conversations on that. We've had conversations on Wormhole. We've had conversations on the platform. We've had conversations, containerization. And we record every session. You can actually go to the portal and actually go back over the past year and a half now. Is it about a year and a half?
Yeah, I think it's about 2 years now.
Is it?
Yeah, it's.
So you can actually go back and you can see the recording of every DevSesh we have done since we started this 2 years ago. If you have any topics you'd like to suggest, you can actually email the DevX team. It's NGA DevX team at nga.mil. I did remember that. The other thing that they've done is they have something called Dev Steps, developer steps, where they walk you through how to set up your pipeline, how to use Jenkins, I can't remember all of the different ones they had. Do you remember?
Yeah, it's basically just how to walk through from the very beginning to an actual deployment.
So all of that is out on our DevX portal. If I can remember.
devx.nga.mil.
No, it's
devx.pages.gs.mil.
Thank you.
Write it down.
devx.pages.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry I missed it. But it does open as every Thursday, I think 2:30 p.m. open to government and contractor folks, and the audience has grown. I think like month over month. It's been awesome to see. We also last year started our first ever software summits. So we had one last December. We had one in April. We'll have another one coming up, I think December 9th. We're working on planning it. It should be December 9th. Really kind of this conversation, but in a slightly more interactive way, and a lot more presentations from across NGA. So if you are interested in this topic, you get DevSesh weekly to learn more, and the software summits a couple of times a year. And really, we are trying to both share out a lot of what we are doing, but also learn from industry, learn from others in government, and make sure that we are building all this with our users as we talk about in the tech strategy. Okay, so that was the DevSesh side. Andy, you were taking Blue Factory then.
Yep. So I guess it was almost 3 years ago when NGA first started, two very tech-centric groups, DevCore and DataCore. And we hired a bunch of data scientists, data engineers, software developers. And one of the first things we found out was it's really hard to do software development on corporate workstation or corporate desktops. This probably isn't a surprise to most software developers, but the challenges of getting how we provide a development environment for government staff to use inside the building was a very unique and significant challenge. So some folks, a collaboration between DevCore and DataCore started at that time. We really started two different efforts. One was to provide developer workstations, primarily virtual workstations that are EC2 instances or similar things that we can quickly provision and give to developers. They can have the accesses they need on them. They can have the tools they need. That worked great for how do I give a developer their Python and IDE that they want to use. But we also found we needed a place to do things that were fit much larger than a single workstation, and that's where the Blue Factory environment came along. And that was a multi-tenant account in AWS where we could give development teams very quick access, typically a few days, where they are allowed to do, it is an accredited ATO'd space. It has slightly different rules than most of our other spaces, in that developers are free to do just about most things that they'd want to do. And if we find we need to push the boundaries, we have processes in place to find out how, very quickly, usually within a matter of weeks, which is pretty fast on government time, enable new features. We found that a lot of people that already had their own accounts like to come and work in our accounts because we got the toys turned on first. And that's been a great effort. And thanks to DataCore, especially for helping out with that and getting that off the ground.
Awesome. And then Maggie, this one will be for you, especially in the foundation world that you all live in. We use both a lot of commercial products as well as government-specific products. Can you talk? I think people have this idea that a lot of what we talked about is just for when we are writing custom code on the government side, but I think it can fit really well with how we're able to use commercial products as well. I know that's a big part of what IPF does. Any thoughts around that, or thoughts around just kind of the COTS pieces and how they can both fit with this conversation?
Sure. So we use lots of COTS and GOTS tools too at the same time. And actually we work with our end users to find out on those particular pieces of software. It may not always have exactly what they need in particular, but we end up working with those particular developers to try to modernize or try to make slight different changes to those particular products, right? So not always everything works right out of the box. So working with those particular vendors, working with our end users to get those products put out and available in the same type of process. Tools, right, available to develop, push, deploy, monitor, test, and get everything accredited through that swap process.
Awesome. Okay, I think we got one last question, and it's going to Andy around supply chain observability and how we are thinking about that and what that means to you.
A major headache.
Honesty is important.
No, I think this is, especially within the last year, this is a major topic and one we're definitely is on our radar to solve, at least in our spaces. That, today in software development, you write a little bit of code, you include a bunch of libraries, typically open source, and really understanding the tooling we need in place, and both in the DevSecOps tooling themselves, but really in trying to improve the visibility of that software so we know where that particular library is deployed, and tied into our cybersecurity group's observation tools so that if there is a vulnerability found, we can track down exactly where it is, what libraries, who the PMs for those programs are, who the developers are. This is a level of observability that we haven't seen in our organization yet, but I think it's coming. Based on some of the supply chain issues in the past year, especially, I'm sure folks are familiar with SolarWinds, that we are a target and we have to be afraid. And that doesn't mean we stop doing things, but we do have to take a closer look. And this goes back to some of the said at the very beginning of making sure we're providing these tools to our developers as early in the process as they can, so they have the same visibility that the engineers or cyber engineers are going to see in the operations center, they can see in the results in their pipeline.
Awesome. I'll wrap somewhat near where I started, that if we really believe software is core to our mission, which I think it is, we need the right environment to deliver useful software faster. And I think we have an awesome strategy. It's signed by the director and the CTO, right? At the highest level we have the right strategy. This isn't pockets of the organization doing this. This is signed by the director, and we have the strategy. We are working towards publishing the implementation guidance, but really it's all about creating the right environment, both on the technology side and with the people and the culture. And a lot of that is being done by Marianne and Andy's team, and really appreciate the work they're doing, and Maggie putting up with my name joke at the beginning and being on here as well. So thank you all for being here, and have a great rest of your conference. Appreciate it.